How's it going, Mathaholics? Today we're going to be learning how to estimate a square root. So if I gave you square root of 4, most of us would be able to say that it equals 2. If I gave us the square root of 9, most of us would be able to say that that equals 3. So what would we do if I gave you something different? Let's say, for example, I said the square root of 58. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, and probably most of you don't, which is why we're watching this video. So how do we estimate this? Well, we need to know our perfect squares first, and in case we don't, I have them up to 10 listed over here. How do we go about doing this? So let's look at the square root of 58 and see between what two radicals is this? It's between the square root of 49, as we see over here, and the square root of 64. We know this because the 50s is in between the 40s and the 60s. Just kind of look at it that way in case you needed a little extra instruction with that. So we have the square root of 58. We know that it's somewhere between square root of 49. Now we have our square root of 58. And it's also somewhere between 64. So we know that it is greater than 49 because 58 is greater than 49. So that's greater than that. But we also know that it is less than 64 because 58 is less than 64. So now what do we do? If we know our perfect squares, we know that the square root of 49 is the same thing as 7 squared. So we're just going to write that as just a regular old 7. And then we know that the square root of 64 is 8. So knowing that, that means that the square root of 58 has to be somewhere between 7 and 8. Now, fortunately, all we have to do is estimate. We don't need to find an exact answer. So our answer is just that the square root of 58 is somewhere between 7 and 8. That's it. So I would just write that down somewhere. You probably don't even need to write it somewhere. So I would just say between 7 and 8. And then I would box that in, and I would say that's the answer. Now let's look at a different example. Let's see square root of 7. How do we find the square root of 7? How do we estimate the square root of 7, I should say? So here we have the square root of 7. Now, between what two perfect squares is the square root of 7? So we know it's not between 1 and 4, so we're going to not even consider that. But we do see that it's between 4 and 9, as we can see right over here. So we're going to say the square root of 7 is between the radical square root of 4, which is less than the square root of 7, which the square root of 7 is less than the square root of 9. Now, what is square root of 4? That gives us 2. What is the square root of 7? We don't know that, but we do know the square root of 9 is 3. So the square root of 7 is just somewhere between 2 and 3. Between 2 and 3. And that's the answer. And this, I just showed you a few examples with smaller numbers, but you could do this up to numbers with any number, really. You just kind of have to think about it that way. And it'll always give you the right answer if you do it this way. So I hope you learned something, and I hope this was easy for you. Thanks.